And one of the things that you talk about, and this is what so many people have, I think, honed in on, and I think a lot of people find it threatening, is the fact that one of your main messages in all of this is that the way that you're going to find meaning and the people who you're going to want to imitate are the people who take on the most responsibility. And in a society that focuses a lot on rights and very, very little on duties, that is a super countercultural message. And the fact that it's resonating with young people has to scare the living hell out of a lot of people, because the simple fact is that so much of our society is predicated on the idea that it is actually in some ways antisocial to take on responsibility, that taking on responsibility defeats the purpose of the infrastructures that we've created to relieve you of the responsibility. So if you say, no, I don't want your help, I feel that your help is enervating me, and my job in life is to shy away from that supposedly helping hand that actually is crippling my ability to care for myself and my family, that scares a lot of folks who are invested in these systems. But you really preach responsibility, and I think that's right. I mean, I can't think of a single person that I admire who is a person who shirks. In fact, I find it hard to believe that there's anybody who people admire whose main goal in life is to shirk responsibility and engage in personal pleasure. As much as people may talk about that, it's just not something people naturally admire.
You can see that admiration sometimes. So you can think about the film Rebel Without a Cause, for example. There's the romantic rebel who shirks duty but the real reason is he's standing up for a higher responsibility and refusing like blind pathological conformity. And so you can get around the responsibility problem that way and admire, creative rebellion, something like that. But those few exceptions apart, I ask my readers just to think for themselves about that. It's like, well, who do you admire? And when do you admire yourself? When do you have some self-respect? And when does your conscience bother you? Do you have self-respect when you're shouldering your responsibilities or when you're abdicating them? You might say, well, I don't have any responsibilities. It's like, well, do you have any goals? Well, I don't have any goals. Well, then you don't have a life. It's like you can't even act. You have to have goals. That just doesn't work. That isn't a statement that works in the world. If you have goals, you have responsibility. The responsibility is to progress towards the goals. You can even change the goals if you want, but you can't get rid of the fact that you have a responsibility to move towards your goals. And you can say, well, I'll just dispense with goals. It's like, well, unless you're like the Buddha, good luck with that. And even in the Buddha's case, I mean, he had nirvana at his fingertips, but rejected it to go back to redeem the world. So the only instance we know of, essentially, mythologically or otherwise, where there was a detachment from goals and nirvana attained as a consequence, the consequence of that still was the adoption of responsibility, the rejection of nirvana as a solitary pursuit. So, and then you think about your own life and the life of your parents. Well, where do you find your meaning? Well, in your intimate relationship. Is there responsibility there? Well, there is if it's a relationship that's based on trust and love and fidelity. Your children, your parents, people who depend on you, you're not going to have that. Well, that's a responsibility. And wouldn't it be something if that's where the meaning was? Well, it is. And this is my experience. I've really been thinking about this lately, about where the deepest meaning is. I was talking to this guy, Chris Williamson, a while back, and he's got this new podcast in the UK. And I was really struck when he interviewed me because he spoke, when he asked me questions, he had no speech errors, no ums, likes, you knows, no pauses in attention, nothing. And I asked him about that, and he said he had been practicing being precise in his speech for 6 years and had really mastered that. But in any case, before he started his podcast, which is called Modern Wisdom, he was a successful young man in the sort of quasi-celebrity way that the culture might offer as a icon for admiration. He worked in nightlife, and he's an attractive guy, and he had money, and he had women, and he had material success. And good for him, as far as I'm concerned. That's a lot better than failure. But he started to pursue something that was deeper, and the podcast came out of that, and he started attending to what he was saying. And I talked to him about the deep sense of satisfaction, meaning that I have when people tell me that they've done something positive in their life and that I had some influence on that, or something I said had some influence on that. It's overwhelmingly significant. And he said he had exactly the same experience. It's like, what if it was the case? All cynicism defeated with this proposition that there isn't anything that would actually make you feel more engaged in your life than taking the opportunity to take the best in someone else and encourage that development. What if that is what we're actually like? I think that is what we're like. I believe that. And I see it. I see it happening all over. And so that's not power, eh? If our hierarchies are actually based on that, most fundamentally, and the best people I've seen who are very successful in their hierarchies are people who take their mentoring, for example, not only with dead seriousness, but take tremendous pleasure in it. Well, what if that's the operative principle? What if the postmodern critique of hierarchy is so wrong that it's actually the opposite? Now, that doesn't mean it can't be corrupted. Institutions get corrupted by deceit and by power all the time. But that doesn't mean that that's their central essence. So I tell young people, maybe responsibility. That's where you'll find what you need, what you desperately need. And I don't say that because I'm shaking a stick at them. I'm saying that because that looks to me like it might be the case. So that seems to work. I mean, again, it seems to work. Yeah. So